Our story starts with the Inca, who were but a band of settlers and warriors scouring the continent looking for a place to settle. They were led by their king, Pachacuti. They eventually founded the city of Cusco in 4000 BC. Pachacuti and the Incas had a travel buddy in the Ethiopians, who were led by Haile Selassie. The two of them had decided to travel together to protect themselves against dangerous barbarians and wolves. Selassie had left his settler unguarded as the Ethiopian warriors ran off elsewhere. Pachacuti took this opportunity and declared war on Ethiopia to kidnap their settlers so that he could eliminate a potential competitor down the line. Needless to say, Selassie was quite livid. Mid-capture, the Incas came into contact with the Assyrians. The enslaved workers started building a farm, and the warriors guarded the Inca territory in case the Ethiopians decided to come back. Northeast of Cusco, the Spaniards appear and make first contact with the Inca. 3020 BC, an Inca scout set out on an expedition to discover what was outside their borders and to seek out new civilizations. The Incas made peace with the Ethiopians sometime later. From the south, Lucian warriors led by Curran met the Incas, Cusco. The Inca scouts moved northwest alongside Assur, Assyria's capital. On that route, they made contact with Harun al-Rashid, who led Arabia. They continued moving north, but had bumped into the coastline. Once again from the south of Cusco, the Koreans encountered the Incas. They were led by Sejong the Pious. Recognizing that many great nations seem to have hailed from the south, Pachacuti directed his scouts to head there instead. Moving south, these Incas met Alphonse the Great of Asker. They continued moving south and discovered Uis's capital of Uistol. And they also discovered Asker's capital of Asker. The Incas decided that they should settle a new settlement out there to stake another claim to more land. With a llama and 8 individuals, the Incas sent out a settler to seek out new settlement. These settlers met Attilla the Hun on their way north. The Aztecs were discovered from seemingly nowhere. Back to the scouts' expedition, the Inca scouts met Austria, who were led by Maria Theresa. Continuing south, the Incas met Berkut of Rigel, who resided in his capital of Castle Rigel. Berkut lives in the frigid tundra, where food is scarce and the waters cold. In 2920 BC, the Spanish and the Incas form an alliance. In 2880 BC, Curran and the Incas form an alliance. Having gone south successfully, the scouts now headed westward. The Incas continue to try and figure out where to settle. They spot a river and a bunch of floodplains. These floodplains were rich in resources such as cattle, wheat, cotton, and also a nearby source of stone. The Incas decide to settle there, and they found the city of Tiwanaku. This settlement of Tiwanaku does not go unnoticed by the other world leaders. Atilla is pretty mad about the Incas' new settlement, believing it to be too close to his own territory. Pachacuti says, well, that sounds like a you problem. In 2520 BC, the Incas and Assyrians form an alliance. The Incas had grew plantations in the past, and they grew cotton on them. Pachacuti gives away land to his most loyal followers, elevating them to elite nobles in the landed elite policy. 40% of all food worked by Inca farmers now go to the Inca nobles in Cusco. In 1640 BC, the Incas and the Assyrians form an alliance. In 1560 BC, the Incas pile rocks in a patterned circle. These rocks would be known as Stonehenge. The scouts had concluded that they had discovered all the possible civilizations on this continent, with what they believed were all the borders of the continent mapped out. They returned to Cusco, but little did they know, there were a whole lot more civilizations that were not discovered yet. In 1360 BC, noting heavy military forces from the Huns, the Incas moved their warriors southeast of Tiwanaku and northwest of Cusco. The Inca warriors stay there and they keep a watchful eye on the Huns. Meanwhile, in foreign lands, other world leaders were beginning to expand their own cities. Alexander found Sparta next to Arabian and Spanish lands sometime in the future. Sejong, meanwhile, found Busan next to Castle Regel in 650 BC. For much of human history, things have remained peaceful as nations tried to focus their efforts on developing. However, this all changed. In 600 BC, the First Great War occurred. Crom and Ashurbanipal declare war on Alexander. A Ulyssean horseman gets heavily bombarded by a Greek warrior, archers in Athens, and Greek hoplites. Faced with such heavy losses, the horseman retreats. A large Assyrian army marches towards Sparta. In a blink of an eye, Sparta falls at the hands of the Assyrians. The puny little settlement's defenses were just far too inferior to the might of the Assyrian army. Satisfied with his conquest, Ashurbanipal makes peace with Greece. Alexander also makes peace with Crom in 25 AD. Back to the Inca Empire, a mighty alliance is formed between Asker, Spain, Uis, Assyria, Korea, and the Inca. This is almost all the major powers on the continent. The Inca warriors who were guarding the empire also finally got some swords with the advent of ironworking, and they were promoted to swordsmen. The citizens of Tiwanaku built a granary, but it wasn't easy. They had no professional help and no workers to help them with the construction. The two settlements of Tiwanaku and Cusco and the Great Inca Empire have been divided in two by the Huns and the Assyrians. This wasn't very good because Tiwanaku needed help from Cusco. They needed additional professional workers to help them build stuff and get things going. With this in mind, Pachacuti goes up to Assyria and negotiates open borders with him. He also decides to take this opportunity to acquire citrus for Cusco. The acquisition of citrus in Cusco greatly pleases their citizens, and the Incas praise their great king. With borders open from Assyria, the workers cross into Tiwanaku to provide aid to their people. Meanwhile, a massive Hunnic force amasses within their territory. Pachacuti is a little concerned, and he sends money to Tiwanaku so they can hire a composite bowman mercenary. In 400 AD, a great artist named William Bogaredu had been born. He had painted a picture of a young girl, and this painting was titled, At the Edge of the Brook. The painting was framed in Pachacuti's palace, where it could be viewed by the people. News spread very slowly throughout the world about this new painting. A few tourists from Greece entered Inca lands, and the Inca's cultural influence on other nations was rising. The loud thundering of nearby troops nearly gave Pachacuti a heart attack, and he thought that war was imminent. But fortunately, it was just Attila trying to conquer Assyria. Pachacuti calmed down at first, like, phew, the Huns aren't gonna attack me. But then, he realized that he would be next if Assyria were to fall. He needed to stop the Huns from attacking Assyria and taking their capital. Well, the easiest way to do this was open war with Attila as well, but that was exactly what Pachacuti was trying to avoid. So, he had a strategy. He could try to make it difficult to let Attila reach Assyria. First off, he refused open borders with Attila. This is very especially bad for Attila, because he was bordered by Tiwanaku and Cusco, and the only tile that wasn't bordered by the Incas was with Assyria, and that was only one tile. This forced the Huns to enter through one way only, because Pachacuti had open borders with Assyria. The Inca Empire became a safe haven for Assyrian troops to take refuge and to heal up. It also meant that the Assyrian archers could now fire at the Huns without fear of retaliation from them. The Assyrians fought the Huns with great ferocity and tenacity. Utterly defeated, the Huns sues for peace. In 580, great engineer Joseph Marie Jacquard was born. In 880, the great artist Utagawa Hiroshige was born, and left to live in the sheep pastures for inspiration shortly after her birth. In 860 AD, the great Inca writer D.H. Lawrence was born. He wrote the novel called Lady Chatterley's Lover.
A woman has to live her life, or live to repent not having lived it.
The book was slowly and painstakingly written out and distributed to the Inca Empire, and a few landed in Greek hands. In 980, Berkut declares war on Alphonse. In 920 AD, 20 years later, Assyria declares war on Alphonse. This is a shocking revelation in the diplomatic community, as the Aspirants and the Assyrians were in the same alliance together. Things looked pretty grim for Alphonse. He was now surrounded by hostile Gelians and his former friends, the Assyrians. But all was not lost. A small group of Askran civilians prepared to evacuate the city and carry on the seeds of a new empire along with it should the capital fall. Would Alphonse be able to defend Asker? Would the Askran settlers be able to settle a new city? Will the Askran civilization survive? Find out on the next episode.